Hello everybody, welcome to part 2 of this series where we're breaking down the effects of the Outer Realms. In this part we're going to be concentrating on the titles. We'll be looking at the titles pages I created for the Outer Realms. We'll be seeing how I created the main title page in Hitfilm, and then we're just going to have a quick look at how titles might impact your audience retention. So we start with a warning screen. Morally, it's the right thing to do anyway, but since the YouTube copper regulations came into effect, I don't think it hurts to have your justification for not made for kids very obvious. After things, yada yada yada. And it was a really good contest with lots of quality entries, so I'm well chuffed. And then we get to the main title screen. So this is pretty much a direct copy of an FXHome Hitfilm 12 tutorial on creating Game of Thrones style of text. I'll put as many links to tutorials and anything else I reference that I can remember in the description. But let's do a rough recreation of the title page. It gives us an opportunity to introduce Hitfilm. I usually use Hitfilm Pro 4 for my editing and effects. It is an older version, but it's probably the best match performance-wise for my older spec PC. I do have the latest version, which is Hitfilm Pro 14, and I do use that for some of the newer functions. But for this, I'm going to try using the free version, Hitfilm Express. For some unknown reason, I'm still at version 13, but let's not worry about that for now. Now, Hitfilm Express, the free version, does come with some restrictions. I'm sure we're going to bump into them, but let's see how far we get. Now you can customize this layout, but I'll quickly run through some of the panels and tabs if you're not familiar with Hitfilm. Over here we have the media tab, and this is where you load your media or your assets that you're going to be using within your project. At the moment I have two loaded. I have an MP3 and I have a movie file. I do want to import another one, so I'll say import, and I want to import this evil castle image. So I open it, and now it appears in my asset list. Down here we have a standard editor timeline. This is where you can load videos and string them together, add an audio file or a music file. But for me, the biggest thing in Hitfilm is what are called composite shots. So I shall say new composite shot. The width and height and the frame rate match the project that I want to create. Because I animate at 12 frames per second, I will load this up at 12 frames per second. And I say OK. And now we have a composite shot. Very much like an editor timeline, but you can stack assets or media files on top of each other to create a scene. One of the things you can do on top of those assets is you can add inbuilt effects that Hitfilm supply. Even the free version gives you lots of effects that you can use. You see some of them are listed as add-on. These are chargeable extras. We'll see what happens when you use them, but basically it adds a watermark to your video. So you're going to have to forgive me if there's any bad cuts in the edit. This is turning out to be a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. But let's get on with creating that text like I promised. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the evil castle onto our composite timeline, and we see it displayed here. I'm going to drag this asset that comes from ProductionCrate, which is a fantastic place for free assets or any other assets for that matter. And now we have these ashes or embers slowly drifting down. Now I don't want them drifting down, I want them to go up. So I'll expand, go to the transform properties, and I'm just going to change the rotation to 180. So if I play that now, they're going to drift up. I want them to be an orangey colour. So in the effects tab, I search for tint. I add that to my effects for that asset, and I'm going to change the darker colours to be orange. And now when you notice that they're an orange colour. Now it doesn't last very long, so I'm going to duplicate it. Select them both using Select and Shift. Duplicate them both, and now we have 4 copies, and I'm just going to drag them in this timeline so they play one after the other. And now when we play, we have the embers drifting up. So let's add the text itself, and to do that we take the text tool, we click in the window, and I'm going to type the text, the Outer Realms. Now I'm going to select all the text, and then go to the text tab. I'm going to centralize it, and then I'm going to drag here to make it bigger. I'll then move that text in space to somewhere where I like it, and then I'm going to change the colour to a medium grey. Now we have the text in the position we want and the colour we want, but it's not the font we want. Hitfilm will use any font that you have loaded in your Windows system. So if I scroll through these, you should see it changing. And I know that I want a font called Cinzel. So there we go. We now have the font that we want, the colour we want, the position we want. I'm going to add a couple of effects to this text. And the first one I'm going to add is extrude. Now we see here it's got an add-on. So if I drag that, put it on the text, you'll notice the watermark appears. The other thing is that extrude, it's a bit too fat. So if I open up the parameters for extrude, I can reduce, let's say to about there. Okay, now we want this lit slightly differently, so I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to create a light layer, and if you notice that light is now impacting the text that we had, it's a 3D light, so if I drag it in 3D space, I'm now illuminating that text, and I'll just drag it down a little bit, and for this purpose that's going to be okay. There's another effect that I want to add, and that's the bevel text. Again, an add-on. I add that to my text, and you can see we now have a nice beveled edge. So if I play this, have the embers going up, the background, and the metallic looking text. And the very last thing we need to do is add the music. And this music is called March of Evil. It's composed by a fantastic composer called Gustaf Rindestal. Sorry Gustaf if I butchered your name there. Very talented, very generous with his music. I highly recommend you check out his channel. And let's see what we've got. So one thing I did forget to put in is I had smoke rolling along over the scene. So that smoke does not come with Hitfilm. That smoke came from another user called Javier Valbar, who actually now works for FXHome. So it's an add-on because it uses the particle system, and I want to place this there in front of the castle. Now it's a little bit dark, so let's go into the properties, go into transform, and change the opacity or the see-throughness, and just turn it down to about there. And the last thing I want to do, add that same tint effect, and I'll add that to the smoke. And again I'll change the darker colours to, let's say, that sort of orange. And there we have the title. So you probably noticed that the titles I ended up with look different to what we've just created in Hitfilm. That's simply because there's so much you can tinker with. Having said that, there's a few things about my end product I'm not happy with. The ashes could be a little bit brighter, the image is a little too dark, and I wish I'd run it a little bit longer, especially to hear more of the music. So I'm giving myself a sin for all of that to get myself off the mark. So I've got about 20 seconds of titles here, and if you look at the audience retention data in YouTube Analytics, it shows that a fair number of people either stop watching at that point or skip the titles. I still think they add something to the overall presentation, so I don't intend to stop doing them. I have made them shorter, but it's something you might want to check out on your own videos just to see if there's anything you can do within the titles to keep those viewers watching. So try to keep them snappy and look at the length of the titles in comparison to the length of the total video. In part 3, our adventurers burst onto the scene. We'll look at how to compose shots and use methods to draw the viewer's attention, share some green screening tips to get better results, and we'll also create some effects and see how they can interact with the physical set. Oh, and we'll also make some shiny things. Thanks for watching.